Welcome again to another Generation Bridge webinar content piece that we're putting out there today. I want to thank you for taking some time to speak with us or to sit with us today. As always, we are driven by sharing wisdom across generations. Generation Bridge started in my church, at the United Methodist Church of Monroe, and I've since taken it over. But the main purpose of it is really to, again, it's given to God. It's God's platform in this sense, that we have some skills. I've been given some skills to do some live events and these types of things. And so I'm giving it to him to use me as a tool. And one of the things that I think I'm really passionate about is being able to share information to those who need it. So our goal is to link the generations by providing wisdom and insight from those who've lived it to those who are going through it today. And so I'm really excited to about the topic that we're dealing with today. But before we get into that, I really want to make sure we understand a little bit more about how it can tie back to our scripture in terms of being prepared. Matthew 24:42-43. Therefore, be on the alert, for you do not know when the day of the Lord is coming. But be sure of this, that if the head of the house had known at what time of the night that the thief was coming, he would have been on the alert and would not have allowed his house to be broken into. And again, I can't say this enough. Every time I do one of these types of webinars or other types of content, it truly comes back to, what if I had been more prepared? What if I had known a little bit more? And that's our goal here. We just want to put people in front of information. And I'm really excited. This is particularly the case for what we're talking about today. When we're talking about planning for living situations, you don't want to be making decisions on emotion when you're thrust into it. If you can have a lot of this information thought about and planned out, you can work with your children, your spouse, or whoever else it is to make sure that what you want out of your life is delivered upon. And I'm so excited that we're speaking with Curran today from, he's the senior director of senior placement at CarePatrol. I've got his contact information there, and rest assured, you'll be able to follow up with him if you have any questions as well directly. One of the great things about doing this kind of stuff at the local level that we do at Generation Bridge is you don't realize just how many people in our local communities have the information you're looking for. But when we're trying to find if we're going out after the biggest YouTube star or all these types of things, that person isn't necessarily accessible. But I guarantee you that if you give a call out to Chris, you're going to get someone who's going to come back to you and give you some answers. And his wisdom and insight is based on so many different people that he's helped over his career. And so I hope that you give some attention and and let's give a little bit of applause for Chris. And I'm going to let him do a better job of introducing himself. But thank you, Chris, so much for joining us today. And I'm going to stop the share here and I'm going to turn it right over to Chris.
Hi, Brian. It's good to be here. I'm excited. Thank you for having me on Generation Bridge. I couldn't do anything better but echo the words that you said in terms of the fact that we don't have a crystal ball in this world, right? So as Matthew says, it's better to be prepared, right? We don't know when the thief is coming. We don't know when healthcare needs will arise and the trajectory of people's health. So being prepared, being knowledgeable, and understanding what the options are is very, very important. So I'll throw a little bit of alliteration at you. I am CarePatrol Chris Curran from Connecticut. What does that mean? I am a local senior advisor with CarePatrol. And CarePatrol was started back in 1994 by a social worker. That social worker was working for a home care agency, and he saw a need to help one of his clients go from one senior living community to another. She was placed there by her adult daughter, who didn't really know any better. She kind of saw the place. Her mother needed some care and she needed some supervision, and she was no longer safe or suitable in her home. And she put her in a assisted living, which she thought was the appropriate one, but it wasn't. So the social worker went and saw her. The woman was complaining that her daughter put her in the wrong place. The social worker helped make the appropriate match between the client and the community. And that social worker saw a business model there that he could help families navigate the senior care continuum. So CarePatrol focuses mainly on senior living. We help people navigate the options for independent living, assisted living, and memory care. Based on people's options, they may have a plethora of options, or there only may be a few based on their income or based on their care needs. CarePatrol advisors really work with three kind of three crux from when they decide what to do with family, or three things drive the conversation. And that's the care needs of the individual, the budget, and the location. So the location may be the location of the senior or the location of the adult children, and where they feel that senior would be best suited to live. So CarePatrol started about 25 years ago, and what we do is we help seniors and their adult children navigate the options based on the care needs of the individual, the location, and the budget. That really drives the conversation, as I said. So our services are free to families. I am a broker, a middleman, a social work case manager in the sky, if you will. I'm helping navigate, and I help make the appropriate match between a senior living community and a prospective client. Or if the finances or the care needs dictate that the individual or the senior needs a different level of care, whether it be 24-hour care at home or a nursing home or something like that, or residential care for somebody who's independent but is on Medicaid. There are many different living options. The goal is to make sure, whenever I'm speaking to a family or a client, the goal is to make sure that we are making sure someone's safe and getting the care that they need, making sure that they're stretching their dollar and using it wisely. So is there a way to make someone's money last longer so that they are maximizing their finances to get the right care at the right time in the right place? A lot of people don't know any better, and they may choose inappropriate places, or they may go to a nursing home when they don't need to go to a nursing home. And that's a big bugaboo for many seniors these days and many adult children, and I'll get into that. So I've been with CarePatrol for about 3 years now, and what I tell my clients is that I've lived the senior care continuum in reverse the past 15 years. What does that mean? Well, after college, my first job was working at Calvary Hospital, which is a hospice and palliative care center in the Bronx. It's world renowned for the hospice and palliative care they provide. I started in their social work department and then quickly wanted to be on the floors working with the patients and their families. I learned about the dying process firsthand. I sat with patients, I sat with families, I worked side by side with the nurses and doctors, providing the hands-on care necessary to keep end-of-life patients comfortable, clean, happy, and as pain-free as possible for the rest of their days. So I was a technician or a wound care specialist and nurse's aide for several years there, again, working with the patients directly, and it was an amazing, incredible, very rewarding job on so many different levels. And Calvary was started by the Sisters of Calvary, so very deeply rooted in religiosity. And we basically said, when we were in Calvary, we were in the vestibule of heaven. We created a sacred space when we went into patients' rooms, because what brought us into those rooms? My love brought me into this room for you, to care for you. As we said, there's Jesus is in that bed, basically. Those are our patients. It is God's love and God's care that brought us there. And that's the mission of Calvary. And I lived that day in and day out for several years. And it was, again, the best experience of my life. And I learned more than I could have possibly thought I would in those several years. And so basically, I worked there for several years doing hands-on care. And then after about several years, I started to get a little burned out. It's emotionally, physically draining. And I was trying to look for where else I could utilize my skills and my passion for caregiving. I've always been a caregiver at heart. And so I transitioned from a cancer care technician to work for a local home care agency. And that local home care agency provided Medicare covered benefits for seniors who needed home care services, palliative and or hospice services. And I helped facilitate that, coordinate that, working with skilled nursing facilities, assisted living communities, and people in their homes who are looking to age in place or are looking to age safely and get the care they need. So I helped coordinate home care options and really saw how home care plays a role in keeping people at home or keeping people where they would like to be, whether that's an assisted living, or perhaps they've been in a nursing home for several years and now it's the time they need hospice. local nursing homes bring in hospice care from agencies to provide that extra layer of support, a chaplain, social work, nursing, and different things to help support the different services to help support the families in need and the senior or that adult who's in that senior living environment or nursing home. So I help coordinate care. And what that really helped me learn and realize is the breadth of options out there and also just the different scenarios that you can come across. Somebody could have $5 million and all the money in the world, but if their care needs are such that they need to be in a nursing home or they need very, very high level of care, that's going to kind of dictate where they live and how they spend their days. So I really learned about where care is being provided, how it's being provided, what's the cost, literally and figuratively. Is it a cost financially, or is Medicare covering it, or are family members supplementing the care or supplementing the cost? So there's a lot of different factors that go into home care, and there's not just the Medicare side of home care. There's also a private pay cash side where you have home health aides coming in and out of your home and providing care around the clock and supervision and meals and things. So I really learned about the senior care continuum on another level, working for the home care agency for several years. A few years ago, I was approached by a gentleman who was the owner of CarePatrol here in Connecticut, New York, and he was looking for somebody to help him build relationships in the area and help families navigate the options. And after sitting down with the owner, it was extremely clear that this was the right role for me. And it was something that was perfect. It was a perfect fit for me. I'd lived the options the previous 10 or 15 years, and now I'm able to share the knowledge with adult children and seniors who just don't know what they don't know, right? So CarePatrol is a free service, so to them. I'm paid by senior living communities when I place someone there. So I'm able to spend a lot of time with families and really dig into what their needs are. And it may not be senior living. Their desire may be to stay at home forever. And that's something else we'll get into. But I do my best to meet people where they are, right? So when educating the adult children or the senior themselves, I try to meet them where they are. I try to understand that everybody's situation is different. Of course, everyone has a unique set of circumstances, but there are, again, we fall back on those 3 points that I spoke about before: the finances, the care needs, and the location. Those 3 things really help steer the conversation. Maybe senior living isn't even on the table. Maybe nursing home isn't on the table. Things get narrowed down when people talk to me. I typically, what I call a senior care 101. My phone rings and I speak to an adult child. And what I try to do is educate them, empower them. Okay. I try to advise them and advocate for them. They don't know what they don't know. Like I said, they've never gone through this before. If we look back at previous generations, this is the first generation, this greatest generation that we're speaking of, the people in their 80s and 90s. These are the people in the hundreds, people who have passed over the last 20 years. These are the people who are the first people to really get into senior living that we see it today and really understand what it's offering. Senior living has only been around for about 25, 30 years. I mean, there's been communities and businesses around, but it hasn't been as prevalent and as much of an option to grow into until recently. So people have been scared. People don't know what these communities offer for senior living. They don't know what to expect. They don't know if they qualify for these types of senior living options. They don't know if they should be directly into a nursing home, or they ask the simple question: how long can I stay in my home? I want to stay in my home. How can I do that? And they might be realistic about it. More often than not, they're a little stubborn and in denial about the situation. But again, my role is to help come in and educate to the best of my ability so that the adult children or the senior themselves, hopefully they're involved in the process. My goal is to make sure that they're educated and aware of the options and what's a realistic scenario so that the adult child and the senior can make an educated decision. Again, empowering them to feel like the decision is theirs, which it is. A lot of times, unfortunately, going back to finances and care and location, those things can be dictated for you and you have less options. But educating the family and letting them know what is the situation and what the reality of the situation is makes them feel better, makes them feel more in control, and makes them feel like they have some control and power and to make the right choices. So that's my goal when I speak to families, is to really provide options and consultation on a subject that they just don't know anything about because they've never been faced with it. People and seniors are living so much longer with chronic conditions now in their homes. People would have to go to nursing homes or hospitals or other care facilities in previous decades, but now with medications and all the advancements in science and technology, people are living at home longer, safer for the most part. So no one really wants to entertain the option of leaving their home until it's immediately necessary. There's typically a cataclysmic event, and that's what starts the conversation. The conversation doesn't start when someone retires. It doesn't start when they have their first fall. It usually starts after that, the repeat hospitalization or the repeat falls. What I've found from working with hundreds of families over the years, there's several things that kind of run through, or several themes that run through. And the one I just spoke to a little bit is nobody wants to go to senior living. Nobody wants to move out of their house and move to assisted living. Nobody. I haven't worked with one client, maybe a couple clients, a woman who's a widow who doesn't want to take care of her home anymore, who doesn't like to cook. She's someone that would sell her home and move into a senior living community, and she'd be great. She'd make friends and have socialization. And she might be someone who'd be willing and able and thinking about it and planning for the future. But the majority of folks, they're living at home with their spouse, or they're living, nearby family with that support, and they don't want to go. Everybody fears change. That change is very scary because it's the unknown. And so people put it off for as long as they can. They will go kicking and screaming. And unfortunately, that is sometimes, the majority of the times, how it goes. But the good news is that typically when somebody needs senior living or needs that higher level of care, it's the best case scenario for them. And typically, almost all the time, it comes out as the best solution for everyone involved. The senior, the adult children, everybody that's been kind of on pins and needles. Is mom okay? Is mom gonna be all right? Is dad, I'm sleepless nights and going and visiting dad 3-4 times a day, or does the caregiver show up or not show up? So there's a lot of anxiety around aging parents. And what happened was, previous generations, people didn't live as long and people didn't have these types of options to move to. So people either died at home or at the hospital or a skilled nursing facility. But now, over the last 25 years, you've had such an increase in the volume of senior living communities around that can provide nursing home, almost-ish type care, up to that level, high level of nursing care. They can provide the supervision, they can provide the socialization, they can provide the amenities and the transportation necessary. So when people are struggling at home, one thing I've also seen, the second thing that I've seen is home care. People want to stay at home for as long as possible. And the first thing you do is you typically introduce home care services. Now, if you've had a fall or something like that, Medicare would say, okay, you maybe need a nurse to come in a couple times a week, or a physical therapist to work with you on balance. But it's intermittent and it's short-lived in terms of the home care benefit you get from Medicare. So people can't rely on that for a continuum of care at home. What happens is families have to find a local non-medical agency to provide home health aides, and that's an hourly service that they charge private pay. It's not covered by insurance. And so people start with that typically, getting used to the idea of having someone come in their home. If, let's say, an adult child is across the state or out of the state, across the country, they need to know that mom and dad are taken care of and safe. So when people aren't ready to move to senior living, I help provide options for families who just want non-medical home care. There are hundreds and hundreds of home care agencies in Connecticut. Not all are created equal. There are agencies that are insured and bonded with aides that are background checked and have tenure and things like that. Those are the types of agencies you want to work with. You want to ask your agencies, who oversees the cases? How much training do your aides receive yearly? What is your background and screening process? Do you have, strict criteria for your aides and things like that? You have to vet the company that you're going to be working with as best as possible, because they're going to be sending people into your loved one's home. And by and large, they provide an amazing service and they do great work, and they're caring, compassionate people. But you have to be careful, and you want to make sure you have the right fit and the right match for your mom and dad or your loved one who needs some care, but they want to stay at home, and that's perfectly well and good. And what I say is another theme is home care works until it doesn't. And so what happens is people will start with 5, 6 hours a day, maybe, or a few hours, a couple of days a week, maybe just to help get people to the grocery store or to do some cooking and cleaning, do some laundry. Those are little things to help people. And if they're safe in their home, wonderful. They get some companionship, they have some interaction with someone from the outside world, and they're getting their needs met. They're safe, they're getting the care they need, and hopefully they're eating a good diet and moving around their house and home safely. That's the goal. What happens is, as people's care needs increase, the hours you need a home health aide to be in the home increases as well. So the cost goes up too. So what happens is, once you reach a certain hourly amount per week, whether it's 40 hours, 35 hours, you're going to get to a point where you're spending exponentially more money per month than you might need to be if you consolidated all those resources and move to a senior living community. So how I educate families, and again, it's their choice. If they have the financial means to stay at home and pay what it costs to stay at home with 24-hour care, God bless you. As long as you're safe and everything is good, and then fantastic. If no one's being harmed or it's not an issue, then God bless. That's great. You want to stay at home for as long as you can. Unfortunately, that's really not realistic or really the case for the majority of people that call my company or I deal with on a daily basis. Even if they have extremely good finances, it's not practical to spend X amount of dollars per month plus the upkeep of the home. What happens is people don't realize or understand the upkeep of the home on top of the cost for home health aides and things like that. So what my job is to educate families is, listen, you're going to get to a certain point where it's going to cost X amount of dollars, and to keep your mom and dad or to keep your loved one in their home, you're really cutting the time short, because what happens is money and your finances and assets turns into time. And what I mean by that, when you're dealing with a senior, you want to know how long the money that they have will last them. So no one has a crystal ball. We don't know what's going to happen. But if somebody has X amount of dollars and we can kind of plan out based on what the costs are at home and what the cost could be at a different location, we can kind of talk about how long it would be until somebody ran out of their assets and goes on to Medicaid. So a lot of my discussions when I'm talking about the finances is Medicaid. And what does that mean? When do you have to go on to Medicaid? And what does that transition look like? So people who have private pay assets can utilize those assets in a nursing home, at home, in a long-term assisted living or something like that. But what happens is, when you run out of assets, you go on to Medicaid, and nursing homes or at home with Medicaid care, something like that coming in, are really your only options. Senior living communities do not take Medicaid. They are private pay only. So it's very important for me when I'm educating families is, where does the private pay money go? Where do the Medicaid dollars go? And where are the Medicare? It's just understanding the financial aspect is a lot. So I really have to kind of dig a little deeper into the family's situation and ask some of the pointed questions about money and things that some people aren't very comfortable talking about. Some adult children don't even know what their family or their parents have in terms of assets. So that can be a difficult conversation, but we have to kind of peel back the onion in order to realize, or in order to have a discussion about what are the best options going to be. I can't provide the best options unless I know exactly what the full picture is. And it's hard because, again, we're dealing with the Depression era generation right now with a lot of these seniors who were born in the 30s or after the Depression, the 30s and 40s and things, and they are a little bit more close to the vest in regards to their finances and their care and their health care. So it's really about being an advocate and being someone who can help. And I always say that I'm here to help. I don't know what that's going to look like. I don't know if that's going to be, working with you for the next few weeks and providing you a full continuum and working with you and helping with placement. Or maybe this is just going to be one phone call where I help you with options and then you go off on your own and you figure it out and you're getting the resources and your needs met. Hopefully that's the case. If not, I can handhold families through the whole process and really help make recommendations and advocate for them. Um, I mentioned briefly about nursing homes and assisted livings. Another theme is that people just don't know what they don't know. Like I said, they don't know the difference between nursing homes and assisted livings. So as I said before, the generations prior, they didn't have any exposure to assisted living. So their thought is all of their parents, people that born in the early 1900s and 1910, 20, 30s, they would have been 90, 100 years old, these past early 2000s. And a lot of them didn't see the inside of a senior living community. They saw nursing homes. So when I speak to families, a lot of the first thing they say is, "Oh, I don't want my mom or dad in a nursing home." I understand that it's not a home-like environment. They provide very high level care. So if someone doesn't need that very high level of care, it's not the ideal environment for them. So that is a first kind of barrier, is just kind of educating what is senior living, or what are these communities and what do they offer, and how is it different from nursing homes? Okay, so the first thing I have to explain is that in senior living, you get your own apartment. You have your own private space. So people have their own studios, 1-bedroom and 2-bedroom apartments. Whereas if you're in a nursing home, you're going to be in a shared room, most likely. You're not going to have your own private room. The state of Connecticut, you can't be in a private room if you're on Medicaid. So if you're on Medicaid, you're going to be in a shared room. And it's, two beds and a sheet, like you think about it in your head. And it's not ideal, and it's not the type of living situation you'd want to be in, or you'd want your loved one in, if you could avoid it. So my job is to help put that off. Not that they're, I don't want to condemn nursing homes. They do the care that's necessary for people at their stage in life. But if it can be avoided, the quality of life is what we focus on. And that is better in a senior living type community, where they can have their privacy in a studio apartment or a 1-bedroom apartment and kind of be to their own devices, but also be in a communal environment where they can get care. There's socialization, there are meals, there's laundry, they're done for you, there's entertainment and activities and transportation. Basically, what senior living is doing is taking all of the burden off of seniors that are in their homes trying to manage, or taking the burden off of the adult children who have been piecing it together for months or for years, depending what's going on at home. So what senior living tries to do is take all the load off of the senior for those little activities during the day that for us are a nuisance or a chore. For them, it could be half of their day just doing laundry, or half of their day just cleaning the kitchen. So things are on a different scale when you get older and you have some care needs, or you're slowing down physically or mentally. So really having them understand, what are we talking about? What is home care? What is assisted living? And what is nursing home? Kind of hashing out those three different avenues is really important for the families to start to understand, okay, these are my options. I could see this working, I could see this not working, or okay, we want to avoid option A at all costs, or avoid option B. And again, it helps start the conversation. There's a steep learning curve. I mean, it's just, when I find out with families, they just don't know. They're typically in crisis, and because they haven't been exposed to this, and if you haven't had a family member or a loved one, you're not going around interviewing senior living communities for the future. You're just not. You're not thinking about that. Everybody's going to die in their bed or in their rocking chair when they fall asleep, right? We're just going to fall asleep one day and not wake up. That's what everyone wants to do, and that's the dream, right? But unfortunately, that's not the way it works, and we need to be able to plan for the unexpected, right? Another theme that I've noticed is that the sandwich generation is burnt out. And what do I mean by that? The sandwich generation is that generation now that has young children, or high school kids or college kids, and then they also have their parents. So you have adult children or adults sandwiched in between their parents who are aging, and their own kids who are aging and going through school or college or whatever. And they're extremely burnt out because they're still working. They're juggling their parents' care needs, trying to keep them happy and safe at home, typically. And they're trying to parent their kids still, who haven't really flown the nest. So it's a unique situation that we haven't really seen before, because people haven't been living this long, right? So the sandwich generation, as we call it, they may have brought in some home care services. So maybe mom and dad are a couple towns over, and they have a home health aide a few days a week. Well, just because they have a home health aide doesn't mean that the daughter is, living free and easy. She's going to be following up with the home care agency, making sure that the aide is there. How did mom and dad do that day? Did they eat? What's going on with medications? When are their doctor's appointments? If the aide doesn't show up, is there going to be a replacement? Do I have to go there and take care of my mom and dad now for the day? What do we do if there's an issue with weather? If someone gets sick, one spouse goes into the hospital and one doesn't, or if the home health aide gets sick, or if there's something, there's just so many different variables involved that adult child has become a case manager, or a geriatric case manager, where they are managing the care for their parents because they can't do it themselves anymore. But the parents still want to stay in their home, so the adult child feels a little guilty, and they want to let that happen for as long as possible because they feel like they owe that to their family or to their parents. Which, listen, I want my parents to age in place as best as possible, and I want them to be safe. But I have to see the other side of the coin, that at some point in time, you're just pushing the envelope too far, and it's better to make the change, whatever that change needs to be, so that the adult child can rest easy and sleep easy at night, and that the seniors who need the care, they may not know any better. In a sense, they may not know what's best for them. So it's my job to help educate them as to, listen, these are the options, this is the scenario, this is what's going to be best for you, and really try to educate them as best I can. Listen, people are able to make their own mistakes or to make their own choices. I'm just here to help guide them and help offer some help, just based on my experience and based on I know what works and what doesn't work. Like I said, home care works until it doesn't. Another thing that I've noticed is that people often thrive in senior living. Okay, and if they don't thrive, if they're not doing so much better than at home, or if not doing better than before, at least they're safe. Okay, so what I say is, someone who was reclusive or not social and didn't really like to be active, they don't have to go to a senior living community and become the mayor, or become the head of the resident council, or be at every single activity. That's not necessary. Is it probably better for their mental health if they were social and engaging with others? Probably, but the goal is safety and that their care needs are met. So people in senior living, again, can have their own privacy in their own apartment and that sort of thing, but you want to make sure they're safe. So I have a couple of clients right now who they say to me outright, I'm not going to do this activity. I'm not doing this. I don't want to go down for meals. Okay, that's something we can work on. And we get them in a senior living because at least you have 24-hour care. That means you have nurses' aides in the building 24 hours a day, doing rounds, checking on residents, making sure that they're happy, healthy, and clean and active, and those types of things. So, and there's nurses in the building as well, administering medication. So they can get everything they need in one place. So though they may not feel like it's what they want to sit in their Barca lounger in their living room with their rug and their smells and sights and things. I get it. We get it. It's not ideal, but safety is important, and nobody wants to go back and forth to the hospital. Nobody wants to go to a nursing home before they have to. So it's really the best solution many times for an aged senior who is, again, slowing down physically or mentally. There are phenomenal options that can help them thrive and live longer and live better, and really give back to the community or give back to others, because everybody has a story to share and everybody has experiences. So there's amazing seniors and amazing families that I speak to all the time, and they have things to offer. They have knowledge, they have wisdom, they have experience. And if the person, again, is not the most social, that's fine. Sometimes people come out of their shell. Sometimes people find something that they were passionate about 40 years ago, but they didn't know because the last 40 years they haven't had access to it or haven't had the ability to do something. It's about tapping back into maybe some passions or some activities that you liked to do when you were completely independent, but are no longer able to do because in your home environment it wasn't possible. But what senior living allows you to do is they have raised garden beds. You can go garden. You weren't able to get down on your hands and knees and garden at your home anymore, but maybe you can at a senior living community. You weren't able to go out and see those speakers at the lecture hall down the road because you weren't driving. Well, now lecturers come into you. Musical entertainment comes into you. So there's so many services that help people live their best life that I just help advise families as to what these communities offer. Not every community is created equal. some communities have a high care model, and some are a little bit of a lower care model. They're looking for more people who are independent. Some communities have memory care for those who develop Alzheimer's and dementia, all the dementias, but some people don't ever need that type of care. So it runs the gamut, and basically they can provide the whole continuum of care so that somebody can age in place. It's not necessarily has to be a substitute for aging in place at home, but it's another option, and it's a different option. And what we've found, especially after the pandemic, is that socialization is key, so key to our mental health, to us staying physically well, being around people, talking to people, seeing people, whether you're talking to them or not. Like I said, that guy who's not social, if he's just sitting in the living room area and just people watching, he's passively involved. Things are stimulating him. People during the pandemic who were in their homes and were there for a couple of years, they declined rapidly, physically and mentally. And we saw that socialization and that the human touch and the voice is all of it is just so key to overall health and well-being. So my goal is always to meet families where they are. My goal is to always educate and provide them with options so that they can make the best decisions possible for themselves, or be prepared down the road to make a decision without my help and guidance, but with some of my vision, some advising along the way. So CarePatrol is a great service in that no matter who I'm talking to, I can always point to some educational piece or something I can speak to help teach that senior or teach that adult child something they may not have known before. And again, empower them to make the right decision when the time comes. Because we just don't know when that crisis scenario, when that other shoe is going to drop. Or a lot of times I see there's a couple at home and together they make one person. One spouse is physically kind of frail. The other spouse maybe mentally kind of losing it a bit or something. So together they're kind of equal. They can make it work. They can get it done around the house. But if one goes to the hospital or if one's away, all of a sudden it's a disaster. And maybe people the adult children may not have realized that before. But what happens is after a little bit more digging and a little bit more questions, we can kind of understand or find out what's going on, what are the care needs of the individuals, and where can we make sure that they are safe and they age safely. And that's the goal, is to age safely with dignity and get the right care at the right time at the right place.
Oh, thank you, Chris. I really appreciate that. And actually, you kind of read my mind a little bit there too. In the last piece, they're talking about the spouse relationship as well. Oftentimes we're thinking through that it's the elder and the children, but in many cases, the spouse is the caregiver. But then as that spouse is aging, you run into a whole bunch of different other elements that create problems, challenges, etc. And the ability to care for that loved one. God willing, we all live healthy and long. I just saw a friend of mine post that her two parents are still going strong, 92 and 93 years old, each of them. And that they're doing the landscaping and gardening around their house and, riding the tractor and doing all that kind of stuff. And it's like, I hope to God that that's what's going to happen in my life. But the reality is that at some point, either I will be putting stress on my wife or my wife might be putting stress on me. And will I be able to care for her the same way? And if my children are not local, that creates a whole other problem as well. I think that's something that we run into for me personally with my grandmother. She was in Illinois. My father was down in Virginia. And of course, I'm up here in Connecticut. And then my brother's in Rhode Island. So before my father passed, it was trying to get grandma out to the East Coast so that we could be closer to her. But she was already dealing with dementia. There's a whole bunch of things that we didn't know about because we're not there. And then there were, I hate to say it in terms of opportunities, but there were opportunities that we missed because we weren't there in terms of getting her the care that she probably needed. We had all agreed to come back to the East Coast, but when my dad and I got there to pick her up and bring her back here, she did not remember having any of the conversations that we had the previous 6 months. And and told us to go ahead and go back home. But ultimately at that point, then now we have this plan, this grand vision in our heads. And we now have a weekend to try and figure out what's the next care option for my grandmother.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not where you want to be. None of us want to be there. I may be, and if I'm 85 years old and I'm in great sound mind and everything else, that can change. And the problem then becomes is you're now thrown into a situation, and instead of you having control over where you might want to go, what you might want to do, because you could have had that conversation earlier, now you're in the situation where everybody's trying to make decisions as fast as they can.
Right.
And that's where we found ourselves. Now, we were very fortunate. The home care place was great. And we were also very fortunate that my grandmother had, made friends when she was in church, and that some of the children of those friends would come and visit her. Right
That's
now,
great.
and when we say children, these are people in their 70s.
Of course, right, of course, right. Because if you have a 90-year-old, you look at people in their 70s, right? It makes sense.
That was it. And we were very fortunate to have that, because then we could rely on them to kind of give us some updates and things. But in the end, this is it's a very tough situation. The more that we get involved with people like you and with others who are dealing with it in our congregations, at our workplaces, whatever else, the more we share, the faster that learning curve is going to be. And the ability for us to just recognize that aging and death is a natural part of life.
Part of life. It's part of, I love that. It really is. It's just another part of life. And then why don't we spend months and months and months planning for the birth of a child and things like that, and all of that. We spend so much time, and there's such little time devoted to educating people on death. It's obviously people don't want to talk about it. I get it, but we're the crisis people. I'm in the sense that, like, people call me and it's like, I got to move mom in a month, or I got to move mom right away because she fell, she's in the hospital and she can't go back home anymore. Typically people call me, they've already done the home care thing for years, or it's been months of home care and it's not working or something. And then it's like, okay, now mom didn't want to leave the house, but now mom doesn't really remember that she's not in the house anymore. The dementia has gotten to a point where she doesn't really know time and place. So we can now move her and she won't be really angry and upset and that sort of thing. People wait too long. And like I said, people usually wait for a sentinel event. Or if I speak to a family, I'll speak to an adult child and she's like, oh, I want my mom and dad to move. They're in their 90s. They're doing okay, but they really need to move and they don't want to. And I tell them, listen, you can do all you want, but if they're not going to go, it's going to take that type of crisis scenario, that moment when someone unfortunately falls or unfortunately goes to the hospital for that third or fourth time, when it's like, okay, now we just keep beating our head against the wall. What's a better solution than this? Again, insanity, right? Doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. People keep sending their loved one home with home care, or sending their loved one home thinking, okay, they're going to do better this time around. Or that, unfortunately, the way the healthcare trajectory goes for these folks is, the spouses can only hold on for so long. And then, if one becomes more frail, or if one starts to wander, now they're starting to wander and they're walking out the door, and there's things like that. There's just so many different factors. So it's, I want to be able to empower people now so that they can make the decisions down the road, for themselves.
Absolutely. And then, we had to do the whole thing where, we wanted to put grandma in a home that they, fortunately, in her town where she was in Lincoln. And again, this might be a future thing too. Who knows? People are going to look for small towns that have dementia units, and and it'll be more affordable, but
hopefully
in her town, it was about $5,000 a month. And so with everything that was part of the estate, and us selling the house, because the houses out there obviously don't cost as much as they do here.
Right.
But with all of that happening, we were able to say, okay, we've got about 2 years that we can make sure that grandma is in a comfortable place and that she's okay.
That's great.
Maybe 3 years, if we could really kind of make things stretch. And and ultimately it worked out that she did pass during the pandemic. But we were able, just like you were talking about before, we were able to say we feel more comfortable that she's safe, because the incident that you're talking about that happened was that she did fall. She fell when there was not a home person scheduled to come out and see her. So she had a weekends where they were not coming out. So she fell over the weekend, and she was lying down and not able to move until that person came in on Monday. So what time that was, when that happened, we don't know. But that was the piece that said, okay, well, she's going to have to go into a rehab. And in
Right.
that rehab, we were able to evaluate and have some more time. But even though the Medicare coverage covers the 30 days for that rehab, they don't oftentimes go that 30 days. And you may
You
think
got that
to
right.
yourself, you got 30 days, but you don't.
Well, so most people come to me and they say, I have 100 days, right? No.
Right.
So Medicare does give you 100 days, that you have that bucket of 100 days. But to your point, the average length of stay in a nursing home rehab is 10 to 17 days, 10 to 20 days ish. If you had a fall, if you had, I mean, my dad just got hip surgery, and he's in his 60s, but people who get hip surgery used to go to rehab for short term for 10, 15 days. Now they don't even do that anymore. Hip surgery, you're home the next day out of the hospital, and you get some PT visiting you at home. So the move has been away from hospitals, away from nursing homes, and move to home, because that's where Medicare pays out the least. So Medicare is trying to save money. Where's Medicare cost the most? The hospital. After that, the nursing home. So if they can get you in and out quicker, they're saving Medicare dollars. So what happens is people come in, again, uneducated. I have 100 Medicare days. What do you mean? Well, let's say you had a stroke and you're extremely debilitated. You were independent prior and you had a massive stroke. You'll spend about, probably 15 to 30 days in an acute rehab, like a Gaylord, up that way, up in Connecticut. There's only a couple of really acute care hospitals in Connecticut, or Burke Rehab in Westchester is very popular. Those are acute care hospitals for people with strokes and things like that. Then you'd go to a subacute, like a nursing home rehab around, and maybe you'd be there for another like 30, 60 days, maybe recovering. I mean, that's a massive, massive case of someone utilizing a lot of their Medicare days. After, let's say, those 100 days are exhausted, an individual has to be out of the hospital for a consecutive, or out of the nursing home, out of the hospital for at least 60 days for those 100 days to restart. So you can't just go to a nursing home for rehab, spend 50 days there, then go home, then go right back, spend 50 days, and then go home and go right back. You can't be in and out of the hospital, in and out of rehabs. That's why it's important to provide the right care at the right place and the right amount of care, right? So again, it's just about people not understanding what their entitlements are, and not, and just assuming, oh, Medicare will cover this, or I'll get home health aides to come in the house when I need them. Medicare will cover it. No, they won't. Not if you had a fall and a fracture and you're entitled to Medicare home care services, that home health aide that comes out is coming out twice a week for about an hour and a half to do direct hands-on care. That's it. The home health aide comes in, they do the care, and they leave. They're not there to do cooking, cleaning. They're not there to do anything else besides Medicare covered home care, which is the hands-on care. So people realize that, oh my gosh, I need a lot more help and services than I thought originally. And then it just snowballs from there. And to your point with your grandmother, I mean, the average length of stay is about 27 months, about a little bit over 2-3 years in a senior living community. So, people aren't supposed to be living there for 5, 6, 10 years. Some people might move into an independent living community and age in place and live there for a long time. But, we want people to stay at home for as long as they can, for as safely as they can. But again, these senior living communities are here for a reason, and they provide a great solution for people who, again, have the resources. You definitely have to have the resources to pay for senior living. And again, it obviously does vary in cost. Fairfield County and New Haven County, Connecticut being pretty expensive. They try to say it's all relative, but I don't know, it's difficult. Even the families that have, of good income, good pensions, things like that, it's still not a lot of money. You have a house that's worth several $100,000. If you're with your spouse and you're moving into a 1-bedroom or a 2-bedroom apartment and you guys both need care, you're looking at spending around 150 grand a year.
Yeah. No,
so that's how you have to kind of think about it. And so that's why I talk about money as time with families, and that kind of resonates with them because they want to have the best quality of life for mom or dad for as long as possible. So a lot of times when people are exhausting their assets in kind of a irresponsible way, for lack of a better, not irresponsible, but just not knowing the best way to utilize their assets, they may be living at home and being great, but they may not realize that in 2 years they're going to be out of assets and they're going to have to go to a nursing home or something. Whereas if they sold the home and, utilize some of that money to go to work for them, maybe they'd be able to live for a longer amount of time in senior living and that sort of thing and put off the nursing home. So
Yeah.
that's just the way to think about it.
No, absolutely. I think, before I let you go here, because we're almost at that time, but I think that you've probably seen a lot of the different family dynamics. You probably get involved that can be very stressful, or when families are at stressed. But where have you seen sort of the conversation be a good one or effective, or what qualities kind of come into that make it for a less stressful conversation, so to speak?
Really, it's just talking and listening. And I can't give a more specific reason or specific cheat sheet or playbook, because basically it's really just listening to the adult child. More often than not, I'm working with the adult child, and that adult child, they're stressed and they just need to vent. One, they need to just be heard, and understand that like, just tell me I'm not crazy. That's what they want to know too, because they're dealing with their adult parents who are stubborn and not listening, or I'm fine, I don't need anything, or that type of thing. So when I do the senior care 101 discussion, when I talk to families the way I'm talking with you right now, basically the same way I would be talking to an adult child, through the conversation I can just hear in their voice their shoulders relax. They're not as stressed,
Mm,
because they've never really had this conversation about what are the options out there, what are the costs, where does care come in. Social workers at the hospitals and case managers at the hospitals and nursing homes, unfortunately, they don't have the time to sit and speak with every family for an hour or for 45 minutes about the whole senior care continuum, and then tailor that discussion or senior care continuum talk to your mom or dad. They unfortunately don't have the time or resources. So a lot of times they're giving families a list of nursing homes to go to if they need short-term rehab, or they're giving you a list of senior living communities if home isn't appropriate anymore, or a list of home care agencies to choose from, because they don't want to get involved. They don't want to really, they're not supposed to be steering families in any sort of direction. So they're just kind of hands off. I'll give you kind of the least amount of information possible so that I've done my job, but I can't get too involved because I have a million other patients to see, or because I can't get involved because it's dealing with people's money and finances and I'm not allowed to do that. A lot of times when it's Medicare driven or Medicaid driven, you have to stay here long term because you have no more assets and it's Medicaid driven. Or someone has a recommendation for some Medicare services, the social workers might be more inclined to offer some solutions. But when it's private pay, they really don't want to get involved. So a lot of times they wipe their hands clean of that. So the bottom line is, when I speak to these families, they've never had this conversation before. They've never had this in-depth of a discussion about mom or dad, where they're not talking to mom and dad, where they're not in a hospital, where mom and dad's in the other room, or in a nursing home where they're in the other room, or a case manager comes to the house and they're in the other room. I'm talking one-on-one with the adult child, and they can vent, they can cry, they can tell me all about what they want or what they're not getting from their mom and dad. And then we can have a real conversation. And 9 times out of 10, they just thank you so much. I feel so much better after talking to you. And again, there's some conversations where finding out their care needs, their budget, and their location after we talk, the only option is to staying in a nursing home long term. They have no more money, or they're running out of they have $20,000 left, or they're just a renter. They don't own a house and they have limited assets, and now their care needs are such that they need to stay. The last thing they want to hear is that mom or dad has to be in the nursing home, or we don't have a great viable solution for them. It's the worst thing for me to say. However, even when I say those things, at least I'm giving them a solution, or I'm giving them a clear cut answer as to where's the best spot for my mom or dad, or where do they need to be right now. And they usually typically just haven't gotten those answers. A doctor is saying, well, we're going to try this test and do that test and this test. Their job is to heal and to find answers and solutions that way. Social workers and case managers are supposed to be helping guide families through this process, but they really just don't have the knowledge of all the different care facilities out there, the different agencies and things, and they just don't have the time. So when I have the time to speak with families, it really is the silver bullet that gets everything else going, because they're able to take a breath and say, okay, like, I'm talking to somebody who knows answers, who's been through this before. I'm talking to somebody who has seen this. My situation, though it is unique, every family is different. I'm talking to somebody who has done this with another family, and they've come out on the other side of it. So just being there as a consultative voice and just listening to them, it works. It really resonates with them because they feel heard, and there's somebody who can actually help.
Well, I mean, the part of even just doing this over the last 3 years or 4 years, took the pandemic off with Generation Bridge, but even just doing it in that time period, I've learned an awful lot about the different agencies that are out there, the different groups that can provide help, and I'm still learning, right? I'm still navigating that. But I think that's one of those key pieces that you don't know where to find the help until you're in a spot, and then you're searching and you're trying to find it. Whereas there are people like you, there are people that are in some of these agencies, if you just knew about them earlier, that are here to answer some of these questions, to push you in a path that's the right path. I look at these types of things, and I look at it as, in my consulting hat, that it's like a brainstorming activity. You're basically throwing out a ton of ideas, right? And then you've got to sift through which ones actually work or are practical or not. But you can't do it until you throw it all out there. You basically have to get it all out there. So do that when your mind's right, when you're not in a rush, when you're not in an emotional track, right? Like, you do it earlier, and then you come up with this path. And now when you're pushed into this situation, you've got fewer things that you have to navigate, which is a good thing. You're taking a little bit of that stress off, which, helps you to start to think more clearly when you're making those decisions.
Yep.
Because I can tell you, in my grandmother's experience, it was because of Generation Bridge, I knew a lot of the questions to ask and the places to look. I knew I could go to the senior center. I knew I could go to these other places, and they would be able to tell me 4 different names or 5 different names of people who could help me out with a phone call. Not an email waiting for 24 to 48 hours for someone to respond back, not a website trying to sift through the information that's relative to me. I had a person to call. I was told to call that person from someone they knew, so they call back. It's just little things like that that help you to kind of navigate through. And then when push came to shove and we finally got to that situation, grandma fell. She was going to be pushed into a rehab facility to make sure that she was physically okay. She had broken her hip, but wasn't going to be a candidate for any kind of hip replacement at this time. And we knew she now had been diagnosed in a previous emergency room visit with dementia. We didn't know about before, which now allows us to actually say, hold on, we're going to be relocating so that she gets the care she needs, because she can't be on her own anymore.
Right.
And also the home care place was saying to us, it's getting worse, it's getting worse, it's getting worse.
Right, but that home care agency, they're saying it's getting worse, but the funny thing is, like, a lot of times these people work in silos, right? So even me, I have a challenge where the social workers and the case managers work in a silo, and they don't know that I exist. So even the people in the industry don't know that I exist. So that's how niche the service is, but that's also how fast paced everyone is working, and they're not stopping and taking a breath and saying, wait, is there a resource for this? So half of my job is to make sure that people know I exist, right? And that's why, Generation Bridge is so great, that we can educate hopefully a whole portion of the community, which is great. And your grandmother's case sounds like
typical.
So typical, you know what I mean?
I hate to say it, but
they want, unfortunately, they're a company, they're a business. They want to keep their people, their clients, at home for as long as possible. Whether that means going from 12 hours a day to 24 hours a day, or a live-in, or whatever it might be, they're running a business and they want to keep you at home. So is it in their best interest for you to move to a senior living community, or for you to move grandma to a dementia care community? No, because then they lose their client. You don't need a home health aide in a memory care community for 12 hours a day, if that's what you had at home, because now you have 24-hour aides in the building. So home care agency, there's a little bit of a push and pull there, where I might be working with a family who has home care, and they're like, well, the home care agency's doing it, and they might just increase hours. It's like, well, before they just increase hours, let's talk about what that looks like, and is that best for everybody? Is that what you want financially and all that? So,
well, and I think
it always evolves.
I think that's what's great about what you guys do. I mean, ultimately, you just add another option to the conversation. And what's also cool is you're not charging.
Yes.
You're sitting down and talking with someone, and you're going to give your best practical advice based on the information you get. And I think we as consumers of that need to understand, look, it's my choice. So if I'm not going to be dishonest, if I'm going to sit down and talk with you, I'm going to say, look, I'm not going to promise I'm doing anything. I'm going to use the service that you're offering up, and that's what
Exactly.
I do. But in the end, you might end up seeing that there is something that you really should be doing. You might come at it from a different point of view that you hadn't thought about before. I think, as you look at the sandwich generation, was exactly the first event that we did in 2018. It was all about the sandwich. So what are my challenges in my age range right now that I'm dealing with young children, with I'm not dealing with at that point anything with my parents, but with my grandmother, I'm dealing with it, all these
Hmm.
things, right? So we built this event around that. But that's the thing, like right now, we have a society where both spouses in a household work. So if you were to bring mom, dad, grandma into the house, there is not as much time to be there for them in that space, just in and of itself, right? And that may have been the ideal 50 years ago, but it may not be the ideal right now. And so as such, if you have someone that comes in, now you are hiring someone to come in outside. Or are you able to start looking at what are the options I have from a stipend that I can get, which a lot of people don't understand either.
Right. Right.
So like there's all these things that are going on, but we're just saying, well, I'm supposed to do this as a kid or whatever. And there's all these things that are being left on the table because we don't know. That we're pretty much there, but I'll say this, the other thing that I learned in the earlier webinar that I had done with the others about aging in place safely, is the right to veteran benefits for care
Yep.
and so forth, right?
We work with the VA. Yep. I help seniors. They don't even understand or realize that they're surviving spouse of a veteran. There's
Surviving
so many
spouse.
women that are entitled to the VA benefit because as the surviving spouse of a veteran and they don't realize. Or
That was us.
you guys,
I learned about this today, or not today, but I think in previous conversations with them. But my grandmother was married to
the
her
veteran,
husband, and he was in World War II. He was
honorably discharged.
honorably discharged. He was in Europe.
That's it. Yeah, he
And
was. He didn't have to be in theater or in war, but he was there, right?
Yep,
So yeah, World War II. Right now we're Korean War. I'm getting some Vietnam people now, some younger people with from Vietnam vets. But yeah, she could have gotten about $1,800 a month towards her care, which is significant.
significant because she was Social Security and her house. That was
Than her
pretty
house. That was
it.
it, and that could have given her a little bit. Maybe it would have given her. I mean, again, she passed away in senior living, but it might have given her an extra 6 months or something like that. So
That's
it's
exactly right.
sometimes it's the difference between qualifying for it for a senior living or not. And so we do connect people with VA claims agents. So that's also a free service to help them through the VA claims process to get that VA and attendance benefit. And then also through the conversations, I'm going to be connecting families with elder law attorneys. So I always say, hey, raise your hand if you have your advance directives filled out.
Yep.
And everyone, nope, 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 nope. Well, before mom or dad develops dementia, someone needs to come to POA, power of attorney. Someone needs to be healthcare proxy.
Right.
We need to get your affairs in order at some point in time. And that isn't just because we're waiting for someone who has terminal cancer or something or dementia. I could walk outside my house tomorrow and get hit by a truck. And what happens to my wife and my two young girls? So the planning for the future and being well prepared or being on top of things isn't just for the 85-year-old and the 90-year-old and that adult child who's pulling his or her hair out. It's for us now to actually get involved in your estate planning and understand what are my rights or what do I want or what are my wishes if and when I need advanced care planning or advanced care needs and things like that. So we touch upon all of it because we overlap with so many issues. If someone talks to me and says, well, I need this home care agency or I need this elder law, I'm always trying to tap into different resources that they may not know themselves exist out there, right? So it's a never-ending education process, really.
And Chris, I just want to thank you once again for taking the time to talk with us. I know you're heading out on vacation, so you got to get all that stuff prepped for your travels and all that. I wish you safe travels.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure. And we'll put all of your contact information and everything in the description on YouTube. And then we'll make sure when we share that out that everybody knows how they can get in touch with you. But Chris, thank you so much again for sharing your wisdom today. And for all those who are here watching and watched all the way to the end, congratulations. I wish I had a free prize for you, but I don't. But anyways, we thank you for taking some time, and please share this with other people. I want to just reinforce that what you have when you're dealing with a local level type of thing, like with Generation Bridge and other communities, is you have people in your community that are resources. I just encourage you to look locally. You may want to look and search online. You get the YouTubes that's got 1 million views or whatever it might be. But I'm telling you, you have people in your own community who are just as talented as anybody else who's out there who can answer your questions. So please look locally, find the people in your community that can answer your question, form relationships, and may God bless you in your travels and your journey. All right. Have a great one, Chris.
Take care. Here to help.